Hello there, all my lovely jewelry makers. I'm Christina at CSLdesigns, and today I'm going to show you how to make this twisted wire kumihimo bracelet. Now I made two different versions here. I made one just using one colour of wire, which I then ended up oxidizing. And in that bracelet I'm also using a few more wires, which helps make it chunkier. For the other bracelet I used two different colours of wire to really make that twist stand out. And I also used less wires, which makes it a little bit more elegant. Now the bracelet that I'm going to show you how to make in the video is about 7.5 inches in length. But I will explain how you can get a different size depending what you need. So if you want to be able to make your own twisted wire kumihimo bracelet, then keep watching. And then the materials that we're going to need is first of all our wire. So what I'm using here is 0.6mm copper wire. So I'm using a copper one here and then a silver coated one. So I'm using two different colours. You can choose to do that, or you can just use one colour. That's completely up to you. And then of course we're going to need our square kumihimo disc here to be able to make our braid. Alongside this insulation tape, I'm just going to use this to help hold the wires together. Then to finish off the ends of the braid, I'm going to use these 8mm ribbon ends here, along with E6000 glue, because it's really nice and strong and it's going to dry clear. And then to those ribbon ends we can attach our findings. So I've got a lot of cloth clasp and extender chain, and of course some jump rings. And for the full material list, along with any links you might need, you can check out the description box below the video. Otherwise, let's get it all ready and let's get started. Then the lengths of wires that we'll need is 12 lengths here of about 45 centimeters each. Now what I then have is, because I'm using the two colors, I've got 6 lengths of each. But obviously if you're just using one color, you just want to get the 12 lengths in the same length there. So what I've also done is, towards one end of the wires, I put some insulation tape around them and just bent the ends back on themselves to stop the wires from pulling through. So now we need to attach the wires to the kumihimo disc. So I put the end with the tape down through the hole in the center there, and I'm just holding onto it from the back of the disc. And then we need to distribute all these wires into the slots. So I'm just going to start from one side. Now in my case here, I've separated out my colors, so I have one color towards one side and one towards the others. Just make sure to keep them like that. So I'm just going to take the first wire and just place it at the top, and I'm going to end up having wires in the 6 middle slots on the top and the 6 middle slots on the bottom. So I'm just starting from the furthest out of those 6 ones, whatever amount of slots you have on your disc. And the next one there, I bring down into the opposite one on the bottom. And then I just take the next one at a time and move my way in towards the middle of the disc. And you can see on this side here, I'm just doing the silver wires, just to keep them separate from each other. So like that, that's the silver wires distributed. Then I'm just going to continue, and these are now going to be the copper ones. So just separate out that very next one. I can just get it out from the others there. And I'm just going to continue that, but in the same way that I finished, I'll now bring it down, and then up. The next one goes to the opposite side, and just keep doing that until I then placed all of these wires into the 6 middle slots on either side of the disc, so the top and the bottom, and it's going to look a little something like this. Now what we need to do now is start the braid here. So we've got a little section before we start any of the twists that we need to do. So it's going to be the basic cross kumihimo braid. So that means I'm going to start from the top of the disc, and I'm going to start in the middle. So in this case, out of the 2 middle wires there, don't worry so much about the colors being different right now, if you are using 2 different ones. Out of the 2 middle ones, I'm going to take the right one, bring it out to the left side, and I like to kind of tug at it here and smooth the wire out while I'm moving it. And then I place it into the slot on the side, so on the left side of the disc. Then I take the left one of those 2 middle wires, release it, smooth it out as I'm bringing it over towards the right side of the disc, and now place it into that slot on the right side. So you can see those 2 middle ones at the top are now crossing in the middle and going out to the opposite side, which is why it's the cross kumihimo braid. Now we need to move all the bottom and the top ones to opposite sides of the disc. So I'm going to start from the bottom. Now imagine that you have a line down through the center of your disc, and you then have a left side and a right side. In this case here, the silver ones are on the left side and the copper ones are on the right side. For now, it won't continue like that, but I'm going to start on the left side, the bottom one there, the two middle ones, the left one of those two, in my case it's silver, bring that up and put it into the left of the two empty slots in the middle. Then I'm going to take the very next one out, bring that down, make sure you kind of tug at it nicely and smooth it out as you go. The next one out, bring it up. So you can see we're just moving them one at a time to opposite sides. The next one, the last one on the top here, bring that down into the empty slot on the bottom. And the last one on the bottom, bring it into the top slot. So that's that left side of the disc. Now I'm going to do the right side, in my case the copper ones. So out of the two middle ones, I take the right one and bring that up. And then I take the next one out, smooth it out, bring it down, and I like to use my fingers to help maneuver the wire as I'm moving it. Next one out. So when I bring a wire from the bottom up, I use my thumb and kind of push against the middle to help get the braid as tight as possible. And then the next one out. From the top, I use my index finger and help kind of push against in the middle there to tighten the braid up. And the last one on the bottom. And I also always kind of push in towards the middle. Now we have the ones left on the side, so I'm just taking one at a time, releasing it, tug at it slightly, and then I push against the braid on the side there as I'm bringing this wire down and completing the 6 wires on the bottom as well, because we have 6 on the top now, but we need to have 6 again on the bottom as well. So we have 6 wires opposite each other, and you can see some of the wires have now moved around, so that's going to be happening in this section of the braid. But like I said, don't worry too much about that right now, because we're just making that first little section. So again, that was one round. Now you just need to repeat what I just showed you to make the next round. So out of those two middle ones on the top, take the right one out to the left side, swapping hands here, and then the left one, smooth it out, goes out to the right side. And again, I also like to press down on these in the middle to help tighten up the braid. And then you just want to start moving the bottom and the top ones, just like I showed you before. And you want to keep doing this until we have all the wires back separated out from each other, so they're not mixed up like they're starting to get now. So now I continued here to the point where you can see my colours are separated again. So I have my copper on the left and silver on the right. It doesn't matter what side your colours end up on, because it's going to all kind of get mixed up anyway. It doesn't really matter. So if you're just using the one colour, all you need to do is just make a length of a couple of centimetres on the back there, because obviously you won't have the separation of the colours to kind of take into account. But now that you're at this point here, we need to start switching up the braiding a little bit. So it's the same basic technique, but again, we're going to start with the top two middle wires. But instead of taking out of those two middle ones, the right one and bringing it to the left, and the left one and bringing it to the right, because what that does is it creates, as you can see here, one full connected braid. What we need to do is, out of those two middle ones, I'm going to take the left one and bring it to the left. Again, I'm pressing down the middle. And then I'm going to take the right one and bring it towards the right. So keeping them to the sides where they're coming from. Because what that's going to actually end up doing is separating the braids. So we're going to end up having two braids that we're basically creating next to each other at the same time. But otherwise, the rest of it here is the same. So I'm then just going to, one side at a time, just going to start with my left one. Move them wires here to the opposite side. So bottom to top. Next one out, top to bottom. Just continue like that until I've done all of them. Remember to keep smoothing out your wires and maneuvering the wire as well, helping it along with your fingers. And then we need the other side. And you see this movement here is the same as before. So it's only when we're crossing those wires in the middle that was different, when now we don't cross them. And that's then what creates the two separate braids alongside each other. So just do this one. And then bring in the side ones again. Again, that's also the same. And now what you're going to be able to see as well is when I'm doing this, we don't have the colours getting mixed up, because we're keeping them separate from each other, because we're not crossing them in the middle on the top there. So next round, that was one full round, just do the same. Make sure, you can kind of just make sure you keep the colour separate. It's a way to remember it. So the left one out of those two middle ones on the top stays on the left side. So that's the copper one there stays with the copper ones. And the right one of those two middle ones, silver, goes out to the right side, stays with the silver ones. And otherwise you just keep going like that. So you're now creating two braids alongside each other. So I now continued and I made my two separate braids, as you can see here, next to each other. So I've got my silver one and then that copper one. Obviously it's just my case. And then what you want to make sure to do here is get the length that you need. Now in my case, I've made these individual braids 20 centimeters long, because then that will determine how long the final bracelet is going to be. And also what you want to make sure of is that they're the same length, because you might find that you have a little bit different tension, so one of them might be slightly longer than the other one, so you can always make an extra couple, however many you need, rounds on one side over the other one. But now that I have my lengths there, what we can do is remove the wires from the disc, and we can do that safely because it's wire, so the braids aren't going to just come undone. Because then what we need to do now is start making that twist with these two separate braids here. Now what I just like to do when I've removed my braid from the disc is, as you can see here, all the wires are kind of all over the place, so I like to just take a few at a time. So I have the three coming towards the same area there, and just basically smooth them out and then just bring them up in continuation of the braid a little bit, just to get a little bit more control over them, so they're not kind of in the way as we want to start doing this twist. And the other ones as well. Makes it a little bit easier to then now do that twist. So I'm going to move back down to the very beginning of the braid here, where my two individual braids start separating, and then basically we just want to start doing the twist. So obviously push one down a little bit and the other one up, and then you basically just want to make them cross over each other. It doesn't really matter which one you cross over and under, obviously, unless you have a preference. Over to the opposite side like this, and then we need to repeat. So I push the top one down a bit and the bottom one comes up a bit, and then push them towards each other so we get that twist effect, and they then cross over again. And that's all there is to making the twist. So you just want to keep doing this. Now try and then obviously get the twist as even and consistent as you can. But otherwise you just keep doing this until you use the full length of these individual braids. So now I completed the twist here, what you just got to make sure of is that on the ends that they're even again, because what we need to do now is bring them back together. So we need to now attach this back on our disc. And I've made sure that the very ends of my two individual braids are sat right next to each other, because then what we're going to do is bring the disc back, put the braid down through the hole in the center there, and then just reattach our wires the way they were. So that means, you can have a look here, I'm going to take, in this case I just have my copper ones to the left, so I'm going to take those three and attach them on the left side of the top, because these are going towards the top side of the disc, and then the other three just continue there. So we're going to end up with the same setup as we had before we took it off the disc, and then also just attach the bottom wires. And again, still just making sure that the ends of the braids there are close next to each other, because we now need to bring the braids back together to make it one full complete braid, just like we had in the very beginning. So we now have that back on our disc and it's ready to keep braiding. So all we do with that is we pick back up the braid structure, but the one we did in the very beginning, we also have that one full braid instead of the two individual ones. So that means out of the top two middle ones, I take the right one of those two middle ones first of all, bring it towards the left, and then the left one towards the right. So we make sure that they cross over in the middle, because that's what creates one braid instead of the two separate ones. And otherwise, we just continue with the same movements, bottom to top, top to bottom, working our way out towards the side, on one side at a time. Just like this here on the very last one. And then on the other side, do the same thing. The bottom one goes to the top because there's an empty slot at the top of the disc. Moving one wire at a time. And then do the last one. And then we just got to bring in the side ones again. And then we have our wires back in the original setup. So we have 6 wires on the top and 6 on the bottom there. And these want to repeat. So this was 1 4 rounds. So now again we want to have a short length here. Basically just like we have in the beginning, so we can use that to finish it off with. So I completed the braid on this end here. And we can now actually take our wires off of the disc. Now before I do that though, I just want to mention that in this specific braid I've used 12 lengths of wire in total. Now this gives a fairly delicate and a bit of a finer result, but if you want a more chunky result, so where you have that twist with your braids, then what you can do is use 16 lengths instead. So all you want to do is, on my top side of the disc here, I'm using 6 wires in total. You would just use 8 instead, so you would basically add another one on either side and the same on the bottom. So you'd be using 16 wires in total. Otherwise everything else is exactly the same. So you can choose to do that, but that's completely up to you. But otherwise, like I said, just remove this from the disc now. So we can actually then start finishing off the ends as well. So I'm just going to be showing you on one end here how I finish it off, because it's the same on both. So what I'm going to be doing is using these ribbon ends. So it looks like this, kind of a little alligator mouth, and it has this little loop on the end as well, so you can attach your findings. It just seals off the braid nicely. So what I'm going to do first of all is cut off the excess. On the other end obviously we have the tape, but it doesn't matter which one you start with. So what I like to do is also use my ribbon end here to kind of measure how much I need to cut off, because we need to have a bit of a length left that'll fit inside of it. So you can kind of put it on top, a little bit to the side. See, that's where I want my ribbon end to sit. And then I take my, in this case here, some strong flush cutters, and place where I then want to cut is going to fit nicely inside of that ribbon end. Something a bit like that. And then all you want to do is cut straight across from one side to the other. So it can be a little bit tough, because obviously we have a lot of wires being braided together here. And then we're going to end up with a straight edge just like this. That's going to then nicely fit inside of the ribbon end. So now we want to fasten this, but I also personally like using glue just for a little bit extra security. So I take my E6000 because it dries clear and it's really strong. It works well with metal, I find, as well. So I take that and just a toothpick to help apply it. I like to get a little bit onto my toothpick. It doesn't have to be too much, because it needs to go inside of the ribbon end without spilling out too much. That's not necessary, because obviously the braid is going to fit inside, so there's only going to be so much space. So I just take my toothpick and put it on the inside of that ribbon end. Make sure to cover the sides. And like I said, it doesn't have to be too much. And then what I have left on my toothpick, I always like to go over the end of the braid and just really get it in between the wires there, between the nooks and crannies, because that's going to then really make the braid adhere nicely inside of that ribbon end when the glue dries. So something like that. Then I take my ribbon end, add it onto the end of the braid. I then take some flat nose pliers. Now I like to hold my piece in my hand and then put a finger on either side of the ribbon end, because I want that to stay centered while I'm clamping it down. So I gently go in and clamp it. I don't just go into one place and do a big push, because it might kind of slide as you're pushing it down. So just do it a bit at a time until I feel like it's almost fastened. I just need to do my final push and check that it's still in the middle. And if it is, you can go in and do your final squeeze and really get it tight on there. So something a bit like that. And I like to go in from the sides and just seal them up as well. And obviously you just want to let that glue dry, and it's going to end up being nice and strong. Do the other end as well, the same way, and then you can attach your findings to these little loops. And then all that's left to do now is actually shape the bracelet so we can obviously wear it. So you can either shape this around something that has the size and shape you want it to have, so like a bracelet mandrel, or you can use your hands and fingers. So what I do is go into a place and start putting a curve into it. So you don't want to go into one place and just do a big bend, because that'll put it out of shape. We need to get a gradual curve here, so I'll go back and forth, and you can see it's slowly starting to get a curve, and basically bringing the two ends together so we can, of course, then use the clasp. And just keep doing this, going back and forth until you're happy with how the shape is. And we can use the clasp to secure it nicely. So I've now completed the bracelet and it's ready to wear. So you can see we get this lovely twist effect from the two individual braids, but it's still one complete braid because we connected it at the ends. And you can choose to just use one colour of wires like I did with the oxidized one, or two separate colours to really make that twist stand out. And also use either more or less wires depending on the final look that you want. And if you're interested in learning more wire kumihimo designs, make sure to check out my book. I'm going to leave links to it in the description box down below. And of course you can also find loads of other tutorials on my channel. So I really hope you enjoyed this one. Thank you so much for watching it, and I'll see you in the next one.